Hey everybody, I'm here with Jacqui Yamada, International Programs Consultant here at ISM. Hey Jacqui.
Hey Clint, how are you?
Doing good. All right, before we kick things off, where are you calling in from?
I'm hunkered down in Maine. Good place to be. Our numbers are low and just wishing everybody well and hoping to stay safe.
And I am in my bunker, obviously, here, right outside Philadelphia. I was told it looked like a bunker, so that's what I'm going with. So yeah,
Good
right
luck.
outside
Good luck.
Philadelphia. So Jacqui, thanks for taking the time to be here. And four questions.
Absolutely.
I've got four questions for you. I wanted to review with you because, really since things have taken shape here, really, I guess, since March, maybe February, there's been a lot of questions coming in regarding international programs. And the first question I have for you to kick things off is S EVP, right? So with everything going on, are there new S EVP requirements and how can schools find out about them?
Yeah, great question, Clint, because there are definitely going to be, there are plans in the work for SEVP, right? The Student in Exchange Visitor Program, to be requiring new documents, specifically with documentation around immunizations and current health status. We don't know exactly what the shape of that is going to look like or extent, but we know from the Department of State, who governs Department of Homeland Security and SEVP, are coming up with guidelines and practical new documentations that's going to be required at the time of entry at ports of entry in the United States. So once the travel restrictions are lifted, folks are going to need to be prepared for that new documentation. Like I said, it's likely to take the form of increased immunizations and statements as to the current state of a student's health, but the onus is going to be on the students and their families. And the school piece is going to be then having to report on receiving such documents as well. And so what's important for schools to know is, one, where to get that information. They need to be paying attention to all broadcast messages from SEVP. Try to connect to the State Department if they have access, and there are plenty of avenues to do that through your SEVA system, and to stay current with what their reporting requirements are going to be as well. Additionally, schools are going to want to help students receive that information and be the ones to tell them about that. From this sense, it's a way of tamping down their anxieties about how that's going to occur and how much is going to be required of them. Schools are going to be the authority that the students and their families trust. And so you want to be able to be receiving those messages and then getting them out to your students in your community.
Great. So, and the next question is one that we actually were receiving a lot of questions on. We did a webinar together, back in, I think it was the end of March. And one of the common questions coming in was dealing with overstays. So the schools that were dealing with students who were unable to make it home. And I think there was maybe hope at that time at some point they'd be able to. And obviously it's probably become even more tough week by week. So what should schools, or how should schools deal with the students who are unable to make it home?
Yeah, so schools need to be paying attention to the students' native countries and whether they're offering charter flights to now get home, or when travel restrictions are lifted, help them navigate making reservations. That could be from now for the next 6 weeks. In fact, if students are not still and able to get home, schools are going to need to pay attention to the dates on students' visas and passports and all those expiration dates, and quite possibly get involved in supporting the student and help navigate maybe increasing program extensions or changing their session or program dates. So all of that is very detailed. If it seems complex, you want to again check in through SEVIS and get directives from the system, or contact us and get help here. But Overstays are a complex issue. Many schools, folks should know, many schools are dealing with them. First, you want to make certain you know where your students are, that you're providing oversight for them, and then you're reporting all of that status back to SEVP through SEVIS. So having a handle on it is really critical for both your school's certification and your students' ability to maintain status. It's not a crisis if they're here. You don't want to, but you do want to take responsibility for the fact they are here and help them navigate that situation as well.
Okay, and then so that leads into the next question about the idea right now of recruiting, right? So we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty right now, certainly with, frankly, just the length of time that all of this is going to be happening. And so how can or should schools recruit now, you know, especially since fairs and some of the events that folks may be accustomed to traveling overseas and attending, they're obviously canceled. Those live events are unable to happen. How should schools recruit now? And frankly, is recruiting even realistic?
Yeah, great question, Clint, because, you know, it's such an unprecedented time, or so we think, and we really don't know when this is going to end. So with restrictions shut down, of course, fairs canceled. So I'd say the answer is twofold. Yes, you should still be trying to recruit. It's going to be really important how schools pivot right now. How do you redirect those efforts and those budgets if you have those fees still freed up? And you should attend to it. You want to stick with being bold at this time. Follow through with the particular associations where you may have been registered for fairs. Don't assume that they're going to get messaging to you about additional events that they've planned or put on the schedule. A lot of these associations are putting on virtual events, and they're scattered throughout the next few weeks and months. And so the messaging on that, we don't know why, but the messaging on schools getting that information consistently hasn't been great. So we'll look into it a little bit more, but I would encourage schools to circle back to those associations with whom they were registered and see if they've created any virtual events. And also think yourself about creating virtual events for your students that are right now in your funnel and then may well be. So if you were going to run a family revisit, student revisit day, you want to think about doing it virtually. If you were going to do a campus tour or visit day or open house, you still want to consider running that and consider doing it virtually. All of our research and our, you know, working with schools and working with families tells us students and families are still very interested in being in the United States and coming back. The interest is not diminished because of the current situation. So while it may be very difficult to think about paying attention to these things, and it may even seem some folks are worried about the timing of it. They don't want to be insensitive to what families' needs are. Get in contact. Think of the idea that you need to connect with them more. Consider additional touch points. Reach out to your constituency. Ask them what they want. What are they expecting? Maybe just ask them doing a check-in. How are they doing? What are they concerned about? Don't be afraid to survey them on what they need and want. We honestly believe that schools that have, you know, prepared themselves to steady the course, these are the schools that families and students are most attracted to. So even being prepared with the fact that you're still planning, you don't know when you will open, but you are planning on reopening, and that you're doing some parallel planning, right? Maybe we'll be opening later than we think, or maybe we'll be opening with half of our students not being able to return. We're working with schools and hearing they're doing things already, like planning for half capacity, already planning to film some modules of their distance learning. So this is a time to understand that families, again, are going to look to schools and school officials to have the at least planning and the answers to lean on to. That this will end someday, and will you be ready when the bans are lifted?
I think it's a really important point that you brought up, that the interest is not going to be diminished. The families are still going to be looking for institutions and schools to send their child to. It's just now, what does that decision-making process look like? How are they going to make that decision, and who are they going to choose? And maybe that part has changed a little bit, but somebody needs to be there for them.
And there may be more layers to that, Clint, and just communicate that you're trying to stay on top of all of that, that you will relay that messaging as you get it. It's going to be really important that students and families know you may not have all the answers, but you're going to do your best to communicate them once you do have them, and that you are hopeful and that you are planning for things to change, maybe to a new normal. But having a plan, having multiple plans for multiple scenarios in place is going to be really necessary.
Great, and that leads to my last and final question for you. And it actually has to do with, you changed the focus of your workshop. And so, as many people are familiar, that our Summer Institute is a live workshop experience. Those workshops are now virtual. And when it was a live event, you had a workshop you were doing called Mastering International Student Recruiting, in which I know you were hyper-focused on the recruiting. But now your virtual workshop that you're holding is on Mastering International Student Enrollment. So why did you make that change?
Yeah, that's another great question, Clint. Thanks for bringing that up. The change is really because recruiting is important, and the changes that are going to occur and some of the new do's and don'ts are still going to be focused on in the workshop. It's now just maybe a third of our attention is on the workshop, but we didn't want to neglect the fact that the current enrollment and getting retention and getting those students back is important, but they're also a constituency that has new concerns and may or may not be able to come back. And how are the schools going to handle that? What we want to do for our participants is empower them and provide them with new tools. How are you going to address getting those students back? Same thing. How will you strategically handle all the additional reporting that's going to be required? And then on top of that, also do new recruiting. So it's going to be a balance. It's going to be finding out about what the current situation is, what are the new requirements, and then being able to, as I say, walk away with new tools in the toolbox and feeling empowered and ready to have those important conversations with your current constituent families and then your new ones. And again, you're going to need to come out and be very confident and hopeful about this, because there are going to be many more layers and many more concerns with regards to student safety, how we handle health concerns, when and how communication is going to occur. So that's quite a few layers. And again, we want to be there to empower schools so that they don't feel like this. There are so many unknowns. I don't know how to go about this, on their own by themselves.
So let me ask a follow-up question to that. In terms of, in looking back over the past decade or two, what can we learn? Are there past events that we can turn to where there has been a disruption of the mobility of international students, international programs? Is there anything we can look to? And while today is an extremely unprecedented time, is there anything we can look to in the past to say, here's how schools dealt with this situation, here's how they came out in a position of strength, and here's how we can apply those strategies to today's environment?
Yeah, very definitely, because as you said, it's about student mobility, and we're concerned about leaving countries and entering countries, and specifically entering our country. And so Well, most of us think back easily to 9/11. A really, an event that more mirrors this was really the SARS epidemic of 2003, right? In that students were restricted, entry from certain countries was restricted, but there really was, once things had calmed down and the disease had been at least what was believed to be contained, there was a bit of an uptick in interest in students being sent to the United States, but also in terms of enrollment in private schools. And so what we're advising schools now, and what will also be a part of the Summer Institute workshop, will be to get prepared for that uptick. It could be a good problem to have, but right, more applications than you prepared for in your funnel, or more international applications. But what we'd like to advise schools, and we're currently doing it, and we will continue to do it, is to, again, understand what your threshold is as a school, understand what kind of adjustments you'll need to make, or that you'll be allowed to make with regards to your admissions criteria, right? Because there are going to be some unique situations where students want to apply, but they don't have the traditional testing, because testing dates and centers were closed and canceled. And so how will you handle applicants that don't have adequate testing results on their English proficiency? Will you waive that, or will you still require it? Things like access to formal transcript records. If schools are still closed, are you going to allow students to apply without those transcript records? All of these, the bandwidth for that and these criteria, whether you can change them or not, are going to be serious considerations for schools to make. And I would offer that you need to understand what your thresholds are and what your capacity to change and reasons to change are prior to being asked the question. So prior to this huge uptick in demand, you want to be prepared and ready, because it could be extremely attractive if enrollment is down in one area to then all of a sudden have enrollment or applications up in another area. It may seem like a quick fix to problems, but you still want to understand the right way to do it so that you still will yield mission appropriate, mission aligned students. So I think there are going to be right ways and wrong ways to handle that adjustment. Again, it could be a very nice problem to have. We saw the growth of quite a few schools' international programs at that time in positive ways. And we saw some schools who made some grave mistakes, and it was harder to correct those mistakes than you would think. But I think this is a time when, if schools are adept with some of the new ways of thinking and understanding of the nuances and new requirements that are going to be put on them, they're going to come out of this stronger and therefore more attractive on the international landscape.
That's great. Well, thank you, Jacqui. I really appreciate you taking the time, answer these questions. I know these questions are on the minds of, all schools right now that have international programs. And I know we're all kind of waiting, for more information. When's this all going to end? And certainly we will be here as we get more, as more information comes to light, as hopefully we get to the end of this tunnel here, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to be here for you, helping you, giving you our insights and recommendations. So thank you, Jacqui. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Great. Thanks. I would encourage folks to stay strong, but clearly seek when you need it. And this is a key time to seek that support and help. Here if you need us.
Thanks, Jacqui. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.